In addition to being a well-known political commentator, radio show host, and author, Dan Bongino is a former United States Secret Service special agent. In 2002, he left the New York field office to become an instructor at the Secret Service Training Academy in Beltsville, Maryland. In 2006, he was assigned to the Presidential Protection Division during George W. Bush's second term. He remained on protective duty after Barack Obama became president, leaving in May 2011. Mr. Bongino, thank you for being with us.
Listen, let's just get right to the point. This was an apocalyptic security failure. A man was murdered in front of his family. 3 people were shot on live television, including President Trump, and the head who came within 2 millimeters of having his head explode on national television in front of millions of people. There's no sugarcoating it. It's no time for BS. Unfortunately, as Congressman Crane and Mills both indicated, the story seems to have been vanquished to the phantom zone of media coverage. It's amazing how we're still talking about JFK's assassination, but nobody seems to want to talk about President Trump being shot in the head on national television, despite the fact that we have no answers. So I have 5 minutes, so I want to keep it quick, and I want to make 3 points. I worked in the Secret Service for 12 years. I loved it. I worked with some really amazing men and women who gave everything. I mean, a couple of them literally gave everything. I know guys who've gotten bizarre diseases overseas, like chikungunya fever and protection operations. Everybody gave a little bit of something in the Secret Service, and it was a real honor to say I was part of it. But they have 3 institutional problems, I believe, in the macro will help us get to the bottom of how this Secret Service apocalyptic failure won't happen again. First, they have a technology problem. The joke in the Secret Service, which is just sadly no longer funny when I was there, and it wasn't funny then either, is they rely on yesterday's technology tomorrow. Think about that. Yesterday's technology tomorrow. Everything from computer systems at waste agents' times, filling out time and attendance records they were doing, to Congressman Crane and I discussing the fact that they only implemented slings, a technology as old as the wheel, about, I don't know, 5 or 6 years into my time in the Secret Service, which is embarrassing. The weaponry was old. Everything was old. These are things I would have talked about sooner if they didn't create a security crisis, and I obviously didn't want to air them publicly. Now you're seeing what happens when you don't have a drone up at a site you could have bought for $39.99 on Amazon. Second, another adage in the Secret Service, you've heard even the new acting director discuss, is the more with less approach. There is no more with less. There's less with less, okay? The Secret Service more with less approach only works if you produce more. That's how capitalism works. You produce a flat screen TV that was probably 20 years ago, $10,000. It's $200 at Walmart now. They produce a better TV with less. That's not what the Secret Service did. They produced less with more. They were given more money and produced less. A 20-year-old criminal outsmarted them on a $40 drone technology piece of device. You're telling me that's more with less? That's disgusting. That's nothing with less. That's less with more. Their budget went up. You guys know you're appropriators. You know that. Third, and I'll wrap it up with this, turn it over to Mr. Prince. The investigative mission, the Secret Service, that they're telling you they need to make them better agents is total crap. That's garbage. Their agents are talented, smart people. They can figure out how to do protection without running out cheap $20 counterfeit notes at 7-Eleven on a Friday night while the president's getting shot in the head. How is it we have a DEA, we have an FBI, we have TIGTA, the IRS, CBP, and 1,000 other entities with a $6 trillion budget, which I know a lot of you guys have been fighting against this grotesque spending. $3 billion goes to the Secret Service, and we're wasting time running out counterfeit notes. It's a serious problem, counterfeiting. Granted, it might be a legacy item. They started doing counterfeiting. That's not what we do now. Get rid of the investigative mission, turn it over to other people, let them do what they do best and should do best. Protection. Thanks a lot for your time. Thank you for doing this. Thanks to the panelists as well and everyone attending. Appreciate it.
Mr. Bongino, I want to turn to you real quick. As somebody with a lot of experience in the Secret Service, is it correct, sir, that you at this point have members of the Secret Service whistleblowing and calling you right now to talk to you about the culture of the Secret Service?
There are so many. It's getting to the point now where I thank them and say, but I've already heard that from 10 other guys. And I bring that up because none of these problems are new. Anybody telling you that is lying directly to your face, and you better hope they're not under oath. anyone is suggesting in a congressional hearing or elsewhere that these problems are new, the personnel problems, the logistics problems, the manpower problems, the technology problems. I just told you a sad running joke in the service when I was there. I'm gone since 2011. Last time I checked, it's 2024. It was yesterday's technology tomorrow. And other things here that are inexcusable that have been brought up before, like Ben and Eric just brought up. The communication failures are basic. This isn't like the Secret Service $1 million radio system that uses NSA level encryption magically broke down that day. They literally handed them a radio they didn't take. This is why when Congressman Mills says, borderline criminal negligence, you should take that seriously. What could possibly be your excuse to say, you know what? I don't really need to communicate with the law enforcement guys out there on the scene. We asked to, they had no obligation to be there. It's a Secret Service's job to protect the president. Out of courtesy, they showed up. And you don't even have the respect of these local law enforcement people, respect for them to take the radio. I mean, where was the CP, the command post? The way this works, so everybody understands, or it's supposed to and didn't that day, for reasons still unexplained outside of, again, obscene negligence, any trip for a high-level protectee, you're supposed to have a command post that runs the whole trip at the airport or whatever. They'll communicate with everyone. But those individual sites, like in Butler County, have security rooms themselves, which are kind of mini CPs at each site. Where was it? According to what Ben said before, and from what I've heard, it was either not there or the locals were running it, offered communications, and the Secret Service, whose job it was that day to protect President Trump, said, we're going to pass on the comms. Really, you described it as catastrophic. He's 100% correct. Eric knows exactly what he's talking about. Just apocalyptic failure.
Mr. Bongino, in your opinion, is the Secret Service in a better spot today with Director Rowe in charge?
No, it's worse. And sadly, I'm glad this is all being recorded, because when something else happens, and I hope it doesn't, I pray to my Lord and Savior, Jesus Christ, that I'm wrong. That you play this and go, look, that guy was crazy. You think this is the last incident, you're out of your mind. We have seen these incidents over and over. We saw the Georgia grenade incident with President Bush. They overtook the magnetometers. The Secret Service leadership in charge now with the exact same people. Exact same. Can you imagine a C-suite at a company that makes widgets? We find out that there's a design defect. The widget explodes and kills 10 people, and the CTO gets a promotion to CEO. You understand that's what happened here, correct? These are the same people. Kim Cheadle, the director, wasn't even fired. She was allowed to resign. She'll go get some cushy job somewhere, and her deputy, who is one of the guys behind these stupid waste of time things like agents wearing red ties on the detail. Because this actually happened, by the way. These people will tell you this under oath if you get the right people. He was concerned about the tie color of the agents on the detail because it seemed to imply he supported President Trump. Congressman Biggs wearing a red tie. You're wearing a semi-red tie. It has nothing to do with anything. This is the kind of stuff the Secret Service was actually wasting their time with while withholding CSU counter surveillance assets and counter sniper assets from probably the most threatened man on earth. If you can explain it, good luck, because that's not the agency I worked for.
And what Mr. Bongino seems to have told us is they haven't learned the lesson. He's told us decade after decade we should not expect the lesson to be learned by osmosis. Mr. Bongino, I will have to draw on your experience in protecting folks. I have none, but I do have some experience in observing what a government agency does when they're not telling the truth and they're trying to hide something. And the pattern recognition always goes to some form of scapegoating. We saw it at DOD when people refused the vax, they were scapegoated and driven out. We saw it at FBI when whistleblowers talked about spying at school board meetings and at Catholic churches, they were driven out. And now I take note of the fact that certain people at the Pittsburgh field office have been put on leave. And I've also seen the story change where initially the Secret Service was blaming folks in local government, and then there was admission that there weren't appropriate responses to requests for additional manpower. So what I'd really like to do with you is bring us into that process. because Senator Hawley now has a whistleblower saying there was a manpower request that was coming out of Pittsburgh, and headquarters Secret Service was putting downward pressure on the local agents to try to reduce the intensity of that manpower request. So give Congress a little sense. How does that get developed? And then what should we think about the fact that someone is saying that headquarters was trying to get people to not make requests of enhanced protection?
Well, I can give you an example from personal experience. I saw Senator Hawley's tweet. The Secret Service is going to rely on this and what they're trying to do now, and you're accurate in your analysis about how this cover-up is starting to work. What they're going to say is, well, there was no real formal request made. Here's an example, and then I'll tie something to something that happened to me. Imagine you're working for a company, a public company. It's actual accountability, stock will tank or whatever. You can't make products that'll kill people. You'll go out of business. If you do, there's a penalty. But imagine you're told by your safety guy, you're the CEO, and your chief safety officer says 50 to 60 times, hey, again, this widget has a defect. And if we put this out, it's going to kill someone. And it's clear after the 50th time that the CEO doesn't care. So at the 51st time you tell the product blows up, the CEO's going to say, well, he didn't tell me yesterday. Well, he didn't tell you because he told you 50 times before and you ignored him. So what they're doing now is Ron Rowe, the acting director, who is the deputy director, the number 2, who is unbelievably, again, got a promotion out of this. A guy was murdered and someone got promoted, which is obscene and disgusting. He is part and parcel of this whole day-to-day ADPO, Assistant Director, Protective Operations, Deputy Director, Director chain that makes management decisions. When they tell you early on, we are not doing this for President Trump, Congressman. We're not doing counter sniper teams. We're not doing CSU. And then they say, well, on that day, we didn't deny assets. You didn't have to. You've been denying them for 4 years. I was told by a direct source, this is the quote, that at Mar-a-Lago, they were begging the DTD, the Donald Trump detail, begging for enhanced security. We can't secure this place like this. And one of the quotes from one of those 3 people I just told you about was, we don't secure nightclubs. Really? What if a nightclub owner runs for president? You don't secure you secure whatever the hell they tell you to secure. That's not your job. That is what happened here. And that's what they're going to rely on. And that's where you guys, I think, have had the guts to take this on. Do not let them fall back on euphemisms and word games where they go, well, that specific day we didn't say no to any assets. Have you in the past? How often? Matter of fact, how many counter surveillance teams have you actually dedicated? What percentage of Trump sites? How many CS teams? There's a story out there that was the first time counter sniper Secret Service assets were ever used at a Donald Trump site. So you're telling me your most threatened protectee had no professional Secret Service overwatch? As Ben showed, these guys are more than skilled and competent. They don't need the Secret Service to tell them how to do their job.
I think that gets to this intent question that Congressman Mills framed up perfectly at the beginning of our discussion. Congressman Mills says the key question here is whether this was your run-of-the-mill government incompetence or whether you see features of such just disregard for the duty at hand that you believe there's some malice. And in his opening statement, Mr. Prince says when the incompetence reaches a certain point, you can impute the malice to that. And what I think you have unique experience in is, well, like this culture of denying requests, like to Trump, or a circumstance where not even the Donald Trump detail, but the folks in the Pittsburgh field office who are not normally on the Trump detail were saying, hey, just based on this, we might need more. And they were discouraged from even making those requests so they couldn't be denied. I think you can give us a lot of insight into the type of questions we need to be asking and of who to understand that culture, because like you think of the Secret Service, they're off with a number of protectees, yes, right? Of all kind of different profiles and different, priority, for lack of a better term. And so, like, what should we think about imputing malice at a point in which Donald Trump, one of the most threatened people on the planet Earth, is having to endure these denials and this culture of limited protection while you're seeing other details, beefed up substantially? I
think, and I don't think I put this out yet, but I'll put it out there now. When I was there, it was definitely not a political enterprise. It just wasn't. I never once, working for President Clinton Bush and Obama had anyone even remotely implicate a political motive for any decision whatsoever. However, from the commentary directed at some of the agents in charge of the Donald Trump detail, which I have heard about, clearly, it appears that for the first time in American history, we have a Secret Service that is making decisions that may not be all political, but may have a political tinge to them. So what you're saying, I would love to say, Congressman, that's the craziest thing I've ever heard. But I tell you with a pure heart, and I'm being absolutely candid, I have no skin in this game. I don't work there anymore. I am not their PR guy. I run my own business. I absolutely believe Donald Trump and an enhanced security posture he should have had would have made him look more presidential, would have facilitated the logistical operation of him traveling. I think they were concerned about optics and making him look like a big shot or whatever, word you want to throw out there. And they were making some of these decisions based purely on grade school level politics.
I don't want to believe that, but I didn't want to believe it with the FBI either. I didn't want to believe it with the NIH either. I mean, a lot of these agencies that have been, I think, subject to political capture, we want to think of them as above that. And we all spend time around Secret Service. We're inspired by their patriotism and the willingness you have to literally take a bullet for someone if necessary. But just like in the military, just like at the FBI, I worry about the political capture happening at headquarters and then that culture informing decisions in a way that's very damaging to the country. So what Mr. Bongino just said ought to be the most important work of the United States Congress, to figure out if these decisions were run-of-the-mill incompetence that you've got to deal with the better tech and the better processes and the better HR and getting rid of the DEI. But if it's something even darker and more devious than that, that must be rooted out, because what we've seen at these other agencies of government is it does not cure itself. It has to be excised, and that investigation is the most important work we can do. I thank you guys for leading this effort, and I yield back.
And I want to go to you, Mr. Bongino. I want to point out some things, because culture failure, as my colleagues pointed out and others, I want to mention a couple of things. August 14, 2024 is reported failure that a Secret Service agent abandoned her post without permission to breastfeed child before Donald Trump was scheduled to arrive in North Carolina. August 12, 2024, it was reported that a Secret Service special agent who was an official site agent for the July 13 Butler PA rally is under investigation for posting videos and photos for protective assignments to social media. July 27, 2024, a Secret Service agent covered the security camera of a local salon in Pittsburgh, Massachusetts before an event featuring Kamala Harris where the salon was closed, but opened it up without approval and utilizing restrooms for an hour and a half while the building's security alarm was going off. July 2nd, 2023, it was reported that a former Secret Service Director Cheadle and senior agency leader sought to destroy the cocaine found in the White House in July of 2024. The evidence was not destroyed due to pushback in individuals in the Secret Service Forensic Service divisions. May 2024, a man enters the U.S. Secret Service Miami field office through a propped open door and was not removed from the building until the following morning. April 24, 2024, a special agent assigned to Harris's detail had a mental breakdown where the agent is reported to have physically attacked the commanding agent in charge at the base after verbal disputes with other agents. Sometime during 2023 and 2024, at least 2 people breached President Obama's Hawaii residence. Though the president wasn't there at the residence, his 2 daughters were on premise at the time. April 2023, a drunken intruder entered the home of National Security Advisor Jake Sullivan in the middle of the night. The man was able to gain access to Sullivan's home despite 24/7 Secret Service protective services in Sullivan due to the sensitive nature of his position. Now, I want to go back to a comment that you made, Mr. Bongino, where you said none of these problems are new. I think just the list of those that I've just mentioned shows that this is not a new problem, but has existed for quite a while. And with a $3 billion annual budget, I would think that we would start evaluating those mistakes to make those corrective actions. Would you agree with the things that I've listed, with the budget that is allocated, that there should be a much better provision of security for protectees than what you're seeing today?
Oh, there's zero dispute about this. Mr. Prince's company had accountability. People fire him and find a new company if he lost a protectee. You can't fire the Secret Service. 18 U.S.C. 3056, they're obligated to protect him. The Secret Service is a culture problem, Congressman. I was an instructor in our training academy in Beltsville, Maryland for 3 years. I ran operations over there, taught investigations over there, spent a little time in the control tactics unit. I was there for 3 years. Unfortunately, I can't count on one hand. I would need probably two and toes as well to count how many agents who could not meet even basic protective functioning skills and criminal investigative skills, but who met other criteria completely irrelevant to job performance, who were pushed through and told with a wink and a nod, this woman or man needs to graduate. Well, why? They're clearly incompetent. Every instructor who's encountered this person has said this person's incompetent, to the point where in judgment drills, they're killing the protectee in the judgment drills. That's kind of not what we do. You're not supposed to shoot the protectee yourself in a simunition drill. And you would say things, you would hear things, from special agents in charge. And I encourage you all to look into this, how the training center works and how they graduate students, where they would say, well, that person files a lot of complaints, like EEO complaints. Okay, well, are they real? That sounds serious. Sounds like a serious thing to me. I'd take that stuff seriously. And they would say, well, they file them enough that it's become a nuisance and they're not really legitimate. But because this person files a lot of complaints, we need to graduate them. Some of those people now, matter of fact, not just a few, but many are out on protective assignments now. And again, this is not.
What you're saying is that DEI plays a major role, not meritocracy, with regards to the current culture that has been fostered.
No, not a. No, the major role. The Secret Service right now is dominated by DEI. It's not a role. It's the role. You ask agents on the president.
And I think that everyone's heard me say before, DEI equals DIE. You know, DEI stands for didn't earn it. And
well,
we need
it
to be
did
very
for Corey
cautious in how we do this.
Ask his family.
Correct.
You know, Congressman, if you had just ended with your first statement and said, well, we may have screwed up the perimeter, you could maybe attribute it to ignorance. Layered incompetence always means intent, correct? So I'll give you an example. You're in a mall parking lot, it's 97 degrees, and you leave a kid in there and you close the door. Did they intend to kill the kid? Probably not. But how stupid do you have to be to do that? So in Secret Service training, you're basically taught a ring-based system, but don't think of it as rings. Think of it as a three-dimensional ring, like a bubble with rings. So you got this circle, but it's three-dimensional above and below. In that outer ring, again, this is Secret Service 101, Charlie Brown encyclopedia stuff. This isn't like advanced level PDT, protective detail training. In that outer ring, you have police officers. That outer ring is out to about 1,000 yards, which is about what a really technically proficient sniper can hit. Why was the perimeter set to, again, absolute total incompetence? But then factor in the other things, and I just want to add a few more. How is it that a counter surveillance unit whose actual job is to detect, to counter surveillance, that's what they do. They're the best at what they do. We asked the question during the conversation we had earlier. How is it that they missed this guy roaming around when the police officers, clearly using their good law enforcement instincts, said we've got a problem? The answer is because they weren't there. Is that incompetence, or is that shutting the door in 97 degrees with your kid there going, I just didn't know? How did you not have a roof line 130 yards away secured when you're taught day one in Secret Service training that the effective range of a really quality sniper is out to 1,000 yards? How did you not have a drone? That not only did you not have a drone, again, this is where we get to the shutting the door in 97 degrees and pretending you didn't know. It was offered. They offered you a drone. It's unforgivable. And just think of the rings quickly, and I'll wrap this up. So in the outer ring, you have police officers, you have counter surveillance, and you have a protective intelligence team. Protective intelligence team is trained to go and find threats. They miss them. There's no counter surveillance team. The cops catch it, but because the comms break down, they miss it. In that middle perimeter, you have what they call post standers. Post standers they're not DTD agents. They're field office agents. They're not Donald Trump detail agents. Those guys were not even Secret Service. They were HSI, most of them, who are great guys and were fantastic. But that's not what they do. If you grab me as a former Secret Service guy and said, hey, Dan, can you go do a Homeland Security investigation? No, that's not what I learned. We are training Secret Service agents to do protection so we don't have to use other entities that don't do protection. So that's the middle perimeter. So that breaks down. The inner perimeter, as you just saw, and I'm glad you played that video, envision that as what we would call the shift, the body guys, right? He's got a shift around them and supervisors. Everyone missed that guy crawling across the roof when he defeated the external, the middle, and the internal perimeter. You shut the door in 97 degrees. I'm sorry. Layered intent, layered incompetence like that is absolutely intent.
I just want to ask one last question, my last minute of time. Mr. Bongino, we talked about this before. I have seen credible information, the extent to which the shooter had significant explosives that were sophisticated beyond that you would expect some 20-year-old just to put together. And that he had sophisticated detonation devices on his person, or a sophisticated detonation device. And importantly, that his digital footprint is completely MIA, that his digital footprint is missing. And that how can a 20-year-old in today's time have no digital footprint? So do you have any thoughts on that, any comments on that? And that'll be my last question.
Well, 4 years of doing protective intelligence investigations with the Secret Service, interviewed probably hundreds of people who have credibly threatened our protectees. I've never seen anything like it. If you would have told me it was a 60-year-old guy who had lived most of his life without a computer and for the last 10 years had been planning this, hard to believe but digestible. You're telling me a 20-year-old kid who's grown up in the digital era figured this out when he was, 13? To never get an online presence? We've seen nothing. Nothing. We're now 6 weeks in. There's not a Facebook photo. You know, it's incredible. We know every single thing about these shooting incidents when there's a political narrative to be had by the media and the other side. We do. You know who their high school girlfriend was. Sadly, you know everything about these people. We know nothing about this guy. And sophisticated explosives, we have this massive law enforcement bureaucracy. No one's got him with an online search history at a library saying, how do I build this? He's 20 years old. It just defies logic. I can tell you, again, 4 years doing these exact investigations, never, ever seen or heard anything like this in my life.
Why was there no security hold put on President Trump? Why was he allowed to go on the stage? Why wasn't he taken down? Why didn't we see a pause?
For me.
Yeah, Dan.
What makes your question even more impactful is every Secret Service site for a high threat level protectee has what they call a holding room, which you would guess is for holding the protectee. I see Congressman Gaetz because it's actually called the holding room. The holding room is for things just like this. The holding room is, let's say a congressman shows up and is a little late. There's an accident. They'll hold them in the holding room saying, enjoy. You all have been in it. None of this is new. You've been in the holding room. There's a Secret Service agent at the door. You guys have congressional hardpins. A staffer escorts you in. Every one of you has seen this or will in the Trump administration. This is not a mystery to anyone. Why was he put on what Eric had called, accurately so, the X? We use the exact same terminology as the military. The X is where that protectee or that limo with the protectee in it is. Why was he put on the X? You have an open threat. Ben has described and your timeline lays out was there for an hour. I'm not going to play any word games. Were they a threat or suspicious? Well, if you're a threat, it's because you're doing something suspicious. And if you're suspicious, it's because you could be a threat. These are silly, stupid word games. You know when it's not a threat? When your CSU or PI team goes and grabs the guy and determines he's not a threat. Until then, your question's accurate. You put him in the holding room, which is the point of the holding room.
So I just want to follow that up. And you made the point earlier about counter surveillance. There were no counter surveillance teams there. There's a public domain videos of him, Mr. Crooks, wandering around. Was there anything in his behavior wandering around that if you would have had a counter surveillance team there, it would have triggered an interaction with this guy earlier?
I'm going to answer yes, but respectfully, and I know you understand, the CSU and PI teams are trained in very specific behavioral indicators that would give off, and speaking about them openly would probably give operational knowledge to bad guys. I know you understand that, but the short answer is not only one, but many behavioral indicators he was giving off that if we could talk in a secure setting, you'd be like, how did they miss this? The CSU team would not have missed it if they were there, which they weren't.
Thank you so much, Mr. Biggs. We will now go to the Honorable Eli Crane for 5 minutes.
Thank you. Mr. Bongino, do you have any confidence that Secret Service has learned their lesson?
No, because I've been involved in a number of, we have 10 years in the Secret Service. I was in the training center when the Georgia grenade nearly exploded. And, the only reason it didn't kill President Bush is because the guy wrapped it in a towel. That's it. It's the only reason he survived, because we got lucky. And the changes made from that lasted about a month. They added more magnetometers. And then basically the same problems resurface again. So no.
I want to read a text to you and see what your thoughts are on this. Do you know who Joe Kent is?
Who is
Mr.
that?
Bongino? Joe Kent, he's running for Congress right now, Special Forces guy.
Oh, yes.
Up in Washington.
Yeah.
This is a text he sent me on, I believe, Monday, August 19th. He said, "Hey, brother, I know you are doing an independent J13 investigation. I want to share this anecdote with you from my experience with Speaker Mike Johnson's U.S. Secret Service detail this weekend. Bottom line up front, Speaker's detail was incredibly lax, failed to seal off all entrances to a very small venue. Johnson wasn't secured and very easy to access. Long version. We had a local steakhouse host my fundraiser with the Speaker. Location was only available after people RSVP'd. But the entrances to the steakhouse had Kent for Congress signs on the two entrances. One entrance was inside the hotel, one out on the street in a busy pedestrian area. I arrived about 45 minutes early to check out the venue and to make sure my team had stuff ready. I also wanted to see if the U.S. Secret Service had a checkpoint set up. I carry everywhere. I planned on leaving my pistol in a hotel room my team had there. I entered the hotel, followed the Kent signs into the steakhouse, and immediately walked up to the unsecured holding room the Speaker was in. He was on a call, so he did not notice me. Neither did any of his detail. His detail was inside the restaurant just BSing. No control over the two entrances at all. Once the event started, they put on a good show and looked the part. I can't interpret their intent, but they failed a basic, simple task. Secure the two entry points, a shocking level of incompetence. The event was in Vancouver in the shadow of Portland, Oregon. Mr. Bongino, is Speaker Johnson, what's his job?
Well, that would be Capitol Hill Police, but it speaks to a larger issue with these security failures. What was mentioned about 3/4 of the way through that text, where everything becomes about optics. I'll give you just a quick example. Think about this. Why are Secret Service agents out there wearing suits? You don't see that with a lot of Israeli Shin Bet and others, because the threat over there is existential every day. I mean, these are little things. You're worried about optics and what people look like, red ties on agents and guys who've got their shoes shined, when you're not worried about door kickers who are going to keep you alive. The good show part is a problem, and it's ubiquitous, whether it's DSS, whether it's Capitol, whether it's Secret Service. We have to start focusing on job tasks and not, operational optics or who's got the freshly pressed suit on. These guys have to be out there ready to go into action and defeat that 15, 20-man Hezbollah team or group of Sicarios Eric's talking about before. This was a 20-year-old kid who broke them down. Can you imagine if they had detonated, taken out that fence line and rushed a 10, 15-man team in there with rifles and heavy weapons? There would have been a mass murder scene. That motorcade would have never gotten out of there.
Yeah. Thank you. You were talking about slings earlier and how long it took the Secret Service to adopt slings on their primary weapon system. Why is it important to have a sling on primary weapon system? And what is this? Why did it take so long for the Secret Service to get on board with having their agents carry slings?
I candidly wish I was joking with you guys, but I'm not. The Secret Service's operating kind of de facto motto when I was there about technology, we're laughingly calling a sling technology. I mean, it's like technology like the wheels technology, right? Is because we've always done it that way. I'm not kidding. You get a bunch of Secret Service agents up here and you get them on the record, and they will tell you exactly that. I remember when GPS technology first started, and President Bush was riding his bike, and we brought a guy into headquarters, and we said, hey, we're losing President Bush a lot on the bike. I mean, he was a good biker. He'd go in the woods. And, the guys were with him, but the motorcade was having a hard time finding him. Well, maybe we should look at this thing called GPS. We've never done it that way before. Why would you need a sling? For 1,000 different reasons. You may need to go hands-on. You may need to grab a ladder. You may have a weapons malfunction. What are you going to do? Hand the weapon to someone else in the crowd while I get my pistol? This is technology the military's been using, as you know, for since World War I. Who knows? It's just, it's a mentality where no one wants to take a chance. And if nothing's happened because they got lucky in the past, then there's no reason to change anything.
Just in a quick yes or no, do you find it odd that literally only days after the attempted assassination on President Donald J. Trump, while the roof was too sloped to place individuals for counter-sniper operations, that it wasn't too sloped to a roof for the FBI to go ahead and tamper, in my opinion, with evidence by washing the roof off that may have had significant evidence on it? Do you find that odd?
Yes, I do, Congress.
Mr. Prince?
Yeah, I certainly don't realize, I don't understand what the rush was to wash a roof.
Mr. Bongino?
No doubt.
Do we also find it odd that, as of recent, one of our colleagues, Representative Higgins, had uncovered the fact that the body of Matthew Crooks had not only been released and cremated, but that the coroner who's responsible for releasing the body had no knowledge of it? Mr. Schaefer?
Yes, absolutely.
Mr. Prince?
Sounds like destruction of evidence.
Mr. Bongino?
Given the gravity of what happened, absolutely.
Do you also find it odd that no ballistics, no toxicology report, no confidence in the actual, I guess, proof of who it was who took the shot has been provided to date? And also, just to follow on to that, how quickly the crime scene at the home was actually released before any evidence had been obtained and released? Mr. Schaefer?
In total analysis of your question, I think it warrants maybe a little more than a yes or no. I absolutely find that to be troubling. I also find that there were multiple friendlies that engaged the shooter that day, and no report has been given back to that local agency that was involved in that information. I feel that's critical.
Mr. Prince?
Yeah, again, there's a lot of things that just smell around the entire thing. And like I said in my opening statement, only the disinfectants of transparency will clean this up. And so covering it up and hiding only compounds a really bad look on the federal government.
Mr. Bongino?
Yeah, I'll say again, given the gravity of the situation, extremely odd.
Do we find it odd that in addition to a 20-year-old not having a social media presence and being scrubbed, that in addition to having the knowledge on how to create sophisticated explosive devices with a multi-channel transmitter, that there was also leaked evidence or leaked information on regards to 3 encrypted accounts? Do you find it odd that these encrypted accounts, which are overseas, has not been discussed and or talked about at any point? Mr. Schaefer?
Absolutely, Congress.
Mr. Prince?
In the same way that Congress passed a law in 1992 that within 25 years, all things related to the Kennedy assassination were supposed to be declassified and released. Why cover this up? Why, again, what is being covered and what is being covered up and why? And it makes a bad situation even worse.
Mr. Bongino?
Odd, to say the least, yes.
I want to go back to something earlier as well. Mr. Bongino, Secret Service, NYPD, worked in the actual training of it. Do you believe that a protective detail should be appointed based upon the title you carry or the threat level based upon the office in which you are to obtain?
It should exclusively be based on a threat assessment. It should have nothing to do with the title.
And do you agree that if you were the Secret Service director, that when the request came in based on President Trump's profile, based on the existing threats that would need to be mitigated, based on the request by his own officers, that would be something that you would approve or disapprove?
There isn't a scenario where a sane, rational, well-trained Secret Service agent would deny CSU or counter-sniper assets to a threat, to a protectee with a threat footprint like Donald Trump. Not a chance.
Well, I really appreciate that. And I know that you're enjoying the private sector, but I can tell you we'd have been far better off by having the director of the Secret Service be Dan Bongino. than it be Ronald Rowe or Director Cheadle.
We had some reporting from Ms. Crabtree, who was here with a panel earlier and is here with us now, earlier about the potential engagement or interference, I should say, by Iranian authorities in terms of our ability to protect our president, Secret Service, and so forth. Do you have any perspectives on that and why that's particularly problematic, or anything to add about that, and how our foreign adversaries are viewing what we're seeing unfold in front of us?
Well, I want you to keep in mind that we've known about the Iranian threat after the death of Soleimani to John Bolton, Donald Trump, former President Trump, and others for well over 3 years now. So keep in mind, this is a regime that has a history of documented terror attacks who sloganeers death to America. So they're not actually, their motives are, you don't have to investigate their motives, they tell you. They've known about it. If they have, and Susan's an excellent reporter. If you're not following her, you're making a big mistake on this. I have no reason to not believe her reporting or its accuracy. She's been that good.
3 sources, if I remember correctly.
If these 3 sources are accurate, that we have been compromised and security allocation decisions are being made by people under the influence of the Iranian terror regime, then this is going to be a whole different panel if we do this again. By the way, I have to run. I'm sorry. I got to excuse myself. I'm sorry. I don't mean to be rude. Thank you.
Thank you, gentlemen. I'm done. I yield back.